I'm running this session in a way to give you a taste of what's happening inside my LSAT courses. I've been running these kinds of sessions inside my courses for about a year now, almost actually. And I was running this as a separate program, a Mastermind, prior to that, but I don't release those sessions publicly. So this session that we're doing tonight is really a way for me to give you a taste of what's going on inside the course. And of course, to give you support around your biggest LSAT challenges, whatever is really holding you back. And so a few thoughts before we dive in. First off, I want to ask you this. What if the reason you're here isn't the reason you think? What if the question that brought you here tonight isn't really the question that you needed me to answer? What if it wasn't really the area where you needed support? So I just want you to take a moment to be open to that possibility that you could actually get a lot more out of this event tonight than you realize. I don't always answer the question being asked, and I look to delve deeper sometimes into what's truly holding you back. Now, we got a lot of folks on the call tonight. We're not going to be able to put everybody in the hot seat to get one-on-one coaching with me, but there are some other places to play as well. I firmly believe in learning by teaching. And so when somebody brings a challenge, when somebody brings a question, I want to invite you to unmute yourself and answer that question. You may know more than you think you do, and you can demonstrate your understanding not only to me or not only to each other, but also to yourself by teaching. And if you said something that was slightly off, I may gently correct you, but I want to give you the chance to play as well by inviting you to answer others' questions also. And if you're not in the hot seat, I want you to think about what would you respond to my questions? How might you answer those questions, and what kind of questions might you ask as follow-ups? Just imagine that space as a place to play here. But I'm not going to be answering questions directly, especially not something like tips or direct questions about things you could find the answers to on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel or the podcast or LSAT blog. This is not a direct Q&A. We're going deeper here. And I want us to have the kind of conversation that only you and I could have. As some examples here, I have published many, many coaching sessions on the YouTube channel, the podcast and such. You may have seen some of those already. A few places to play here. Again, not answering the question being asked. I had a student the other day asking me about logic games, asking about rule substitution questions when she was trying to do all the games in her head. And that's obviously a more fundamental issue. And so surface and specificity versus going deeper. Process over simply information, simple Q&A. Rule substitution questions, I've given my general take on those elsewhere already, but if through our conversation we could discover that you were doing things in your head and you weren't getting all the rules down properly, that's a much more fundamental issue. I had another student asking me about whether to do timed sections versus doing questions by type when they weren't properly reviewing the questions they were doing. So it's all good. Timed sections, questions by type, it's all useful. But if you're not reviewing them in depth, that's the more fundamental issue. Finally, I had a student email me today about reading comprehension parallel reasoning questions, a super specific type of question among the most difficult, but she still hadn't figured out her overall approach to the passages. So again, what are the more fundamental things that could be holding you back? Let's play there. I also want you to think about the idea of what if your goals didn't represent your fullest potential? When students apply to work with me, I'll ask them what's their current score, what's their starting score, and what's their goal score. And whenever I see any goal score listed below 180, I want to push back on that. I never see any reason not to shoot for a 180. If you're committed to this process, I want you to give it your all. Now, obviously, not everybody's going to end up at 180. Fewer than 1% of test takers do. But that's a place to come from. Whether you get there or not specifically is not the most important thing to me. If you land at a 178, fantastic. If you land at 175, that's also great. And 170 may be enough for you. 165 may be enough for you. And if you have a 4.0 GPA, maybe the 160s or below is fine for you also, depending on your goals. But I want you to approach this exam as an end in of itself, even though it's simply in reality one stop on your legal career journey. There are many steps after this: law school, the bar, being successful in your job itself. But I want you to take on this challenge of the LSAT like you're giving it your all. And so when a student says to me, what if I only do 2 games, or what if I only do 3 passages? that may be your approach and that may be fine for you, but that's not the place I work with my students. I work with students who are aiming to solve everything and really to aim for that 180, to give it their fullest effort and to aim for the highest potential possible. And finally, again, learning by teaching. What if you knew more than you thought you did? And what if you could actually support another student and develop your own understanding further by teaching others? So with that being said, let's play. I want to invite you to raise your hand. There's a raise hand function here in Zoom if you want to play and get in the hot seat and receive some coaching from me. And also alternatively, type in the chat. So Brenna was quick. She was up first. All right, Brenna, let's play. Please unmute yourself and let's see where it goes.
Hi, Steve. You were saying it's more of a deeper issue, and I think I don't have any specific questions. I can just speak to my own personal experience that I struggle with endurance, and I feel like I conflict with confidence is something that is the reason I feel like my score isn't where I wanted to be. And you were saying deeper issues, and I feel like that's something that inhibits me is the confidence and the endurance during the tests. And like I said, I think that's just reflected in my everyday life. And I'm just asking what your opinion on that is and how to approach that. That issue in life, but also with the LSAT, if that's okay, if I can ask that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Okay. So how long have you been at this for?
I've been at this for 3 months now.
Okay. How many hours per week? What have you done?
So 3 hours a day, 3 to 4 hours a day. And I typically take a lot of section tests. And one thing I was recommending is blind review, but I review what I missed and everything and try to figure out where I'm going wrong, logical reasoning, and then reading comp. I try to diagnose what I'm doing wrong. I feel like I've kind of realized I just speed read, and then logic games, it's more of a timing issue. But I just noticed with the trends in my score, my section test is just I do really well in the beginning, and then towards the end, I just start to do kind of bad because I feel like it's just an endurance issue and a lack of confidence, especially when I hit a hard bump. So I just wanted, like I said, this relates to my own personal life, and I'm just wondering if you have any advice for that issue with endurance and having confidence in that I can score as high as I need to.
So how high do you need to score?
I sound kind of score a 160. That's ideal. But for the school I want to go to, I just need a 156. But 160 is what I want deep in my heart.
Okay, awesome. And when are you taking the exam?
I'm taking it. So I have one in August 29th, and I have another in November. I'm taking. So just in case August one does not go as planned, I plan to take it in November.
Okay, so you've been at it for 3 months already. You've got another 3 months until November.
Yes.
How far have you come in the first 3 months?
I improved 10 points. I proved 8 points in the first month, and then I got kind of too confident in that, I felt like, and then I started staggering around 150, and that's currently where I'm at right now, 150, 152. And it's just very discouraging, with just because I made so much gains in the first month with logic, some of the logical reasoning, but then I ended up getting, kind of going back, staggering around 150.
Okay. Are you familiar with the idea of diminishing marginal returns?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so the idea basically is that with every additional point you gain, it becomes harder to gain the next point because you've already gotten the lowest hanging fruit.
Okay.
So the easiest gains come at the beginning with anything. And you have to put in a little bit more as you move forward in order to squeeze out more results.
Okay.
That's the idea here. So for 10 points in 3 months, it may take 4 or 5 months to get the next 10 points. Potentially. That's the idea. But also, you've gotten 10 points already. That's fantastic. Let's celebrate that. There are some people who've barely improved at all after 3 months. So let's celebrate where you've come already. Then let's look at what you may need to change going forward to get those next 10 points. Because what got you here may not get you there. But you're at the halfway mark right now as I see it. Because you've got August and you've got November as well.
Yes, sir.
You don't have to call me sir. You can just call me Steve. I'm a pretty casual guy. But you've got a few weeks until November. You've got about 3 weeks, right? Till August. 3 weeks till August. What would you need to do in the next 3 weeks until the August LSAT to feel good going into that, knowing that you still have November going forward?
Honestly, I would like to average on my practice test around 154 is kind of what would get me confident for August, to be honest. And I feel like, and how do I approach to get there? Is that what you're saying? What plan do I have in place to get there?
What would you
Is that what
need
you're
to,
asking?
what would you need to do over the next few weeks to feel good about August, knowing that November is in the future? And you said 154, right? You want to be practice test scores in the 154, right? Around that
What I would
range.
what I would have to do feel confident be just kind of keep November in the back of my mind, but also just like study harder, but also study smarter. I feel like that's another way, because I feel like I've been, I put a lot of hours, but I feel like a lot of that time also, not gonna lie, has been a lot of planning, like saying like, oh, I hit this like this, number in my raw score for the section, and I feel like I focus too much on that number than learning the material sometimes. So that's also an issue I didn't think about. So yeah.
Now, where are your practice test scores right now?
Still around 150, 151. Whereas in the highest average across all the section tests has been about a 156. But, endurance is an issue with the practice test. So I'm trying to do a full out practice test and get around a 155. Is
Okay,
kind of
and
like where
but why, by a full practice test, how many sections do you mean?
LSAT flex type thing,
Right, so
three
3.
sections.
Okay, 3. Just double checking that. Okay, so what I'll say is you're pretty close. 150, 151, 154. That's within
Yes.
this margin of error or the score band. You got 3 points on either end. So through luck alone, if your average is a 151, you do enough tests, you could hit a 154. And you might feel good about that. But as you said as well, it's not all about the number, right? It's about the understanding. Knowing that also you've got another 3 months you could study for November. And that could be the make or break for you, or at least that could be the one that really allows you the time to master the material. Because let's say 3 weeks to improve 10 points in 3 weeks, when it took you 3 months to improve 10 points. And as I said, the earlier points are typically the easier ones. So
Yes.
I'm just suggesting you may be holding yourself to too high a standard, but also knowing that you're in a pretty good position because you could take November and still apply this cycle if you want to. It's early enough.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what if you thought about August as simply a dry run to get a sense of what the flex is like and to get a sense of the format, sitting down for the test day experience?
And I also got the score preview, so I bought that, so just in case I do poorly or do not as well as I hoped, I can always get rid of that score and then take it 3 more times if I need to. But I'm trying not too much pressure myself, just in case the score in August does go badly, and and that's just going to take me looking over what I did wrong, and so.
Fantastic. So I'd say think about flex as the format alone, just to get a sense of what that is like as a dry run. And you have the score preview, which is nice. And then think about November, what you could change about your approach. Now, I've said a lot already. I want to invite others to chime in. So if you have some suggestions for Brenna, please simply unmute yourself and share. We have a lot of experienced folks here in the room already. I know, obviously, I saw Daniel show up, which is awesome. I saw Richard here. And so either of you or anyone else, please feel free to chime in.
Well, I can go. Hi, Brenna. Thank you so much for sharing. It's great to meet you, Steve. I look forward to our conversation tomorrow. I think the point that you made, or that when you shared about, your endurance and building confidence, I want to say that, obviously you're not alone. That's something that, I'm working on still. Especially since, I've improved over time, but especially initially there was a sense of, oh my goodness, like I'm finishing the sections maybe too slowly, or I'm always rushing at the end. I think that you kind of seem to already know, like, you have to master the material. And I definitely let go of obsessing over scores and just focused on learning what I need to learn, because I think that when you put the foundation in place, that will naturally, the confidence will emerge. Things will it'll almost become like a form of muscle memory, and you don't have to think about every little detail every single time. And I think that when you can get to that kind of a point where you've internalized the rules so well that it's almost automatic, I think that the confidence will follow, because you're doing the exam and you're like, you read the question. Let's use logical reasoning, for example, and you can tell the type of question. You can already anticipate some of the answers, some of the false answers, some of the tricks they might use, what the correct answer might what it might look like for a necessary assumption. You know that, okay, I'm looking for a weaker language in the correct answer versus sufficient assumption where I might want stronger language in the correct answer. I think that kind of practice is just really what's going to help you build that confidence. But I definitely, I'm rooting for you, and thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I was going to chime in if you didn't mind.
Please.
Unless you had something to extend on, Steve. But what I was going to say is, it's kind of fun to get into these big environments because a lot of us are in different places on the LSAT journey, if you will. And a lot of us have different goals. I mean, some of us are like, okay, hey, the first in the family to go to law school, I need to get past this threshold. And other people are like, hey, I've got a high GPA, so I can maybe afford to, not match that energy or maybe have a little bit more comfort on the LSAT. But one thing is, LSAT really is just a bunch of folks who really know the LSAT inside and out. And they come up with questions to try and trick you based on what they've done before. But really, if it's just a situation where every question you get is a new opportunity to say, okay, what was LSAC thinking in this moment, and how are they trying to trip me up because they don't like us, they hate us with a burning passion, then it becomes a lot easier because what happens when you miss a question? Okay, you drill that question type for a little bit until you're confident in it. So as long as you get to a point where it's like not score thresholds or anything like that, but rather how can I beat LSAC at their own game, then a lot of that motivation comes and a lot of that expertise comes because you're just trying to learn what their approach is. And eventually it gets to the point where you can tell LSAC what LSAC was thinking when you get a question better than LSAC might tell you.
It's fantastic advice, Daniel and Richard as well. Thank you, both of you, for sharing that. And I think that certainly that adversarial approach and that competitive approach that Daniel raised can be a useful one if you choose to adopt it. And then what Richard was saying regarding the review process, I think is incredibly important as well, to look for those tricks and to look for those traps. And Brenna, you said that you're getting a lot of the easier ones right. So the ones, for example, in logical reasoning, that first half of the section. So you get those right, feel good about them. But it could also be useful to simply put aside the measurements, put aside the full sections, possibly drilling questions by type on your weak areas, and possibly simply covering harder questions only, which in the short term may diminish your confidence, but it's all about how you go into it. If you're attacking only difficult questions, obviously the accuracy rate is not going to be high. But what if you took on the mindset of wanting to get questions wrong? I might say to students sometimes, I want you to get 50 questions wrong or 100 questions wrong before the next time we meet, so that you will get them wrong now, not later on test day, of course, and you will have the chance to review the things that you're most likely to have trouble with, so you can see uniquely which tricks and traps you're uniquely prone to falling for. If you're interested in some different ways to play with the review process, look up the Socratic review method. I have some videos on it on my channel where I go in depth on exactly what the questions you could be asking are, what they look like, and how you could engage in actually writing down your thoughts, writing down your own explanations, or talking it out with a friend or a study buddy, a coach or a tutor. That can really help you to deepen your understanding. How does all this strike you, Brenna? We've all shared a lot.
It's honestly really opened my eyes a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Like, I've been sitting here just like focusing, listening. And especially one thing the second guy said, he said that trying to just learn the material. Both of them said that, like trying to learn the material, don't so focus so much on the numbers, and just really, I don't want to take up too much time, but just aim for, and you were also saying, look at more difficult questions to kind of help you with accuracy and everything. But I think just like approaching it, like I want to beat the LSAT test makers at their game is kind of approach I should take instead of just trying to focus on the statistical analysis of my progress. So thank you so much, Steve.
Fantastic. And thanks to Richard and Daniel as well. So Brenna, I'm going to leave you here because I think you got your key insight, but I thank you for sharing. All right, let's see. Kendall, you want to play?
Sure, I'll play.
Fantastic. All right. So what brought you here tonight? What's your biggest challenge?
So I'm kind of in a weird position. So I just took the July LSAT, having studied for a year prior to it. I scored a 159. I typically get around a 166 when I'm doing a practice test. Was shooting for 170s hopefully when I was studying. But now I'm kind of I don't know if it was the fact that it was a stressful day that messed it up. I don't get to see my scores because it was a non-disclosed. So kind of how to regroup for the October one, and kind of knowing that the logical reasoning is the section that if I'm going to mess up on is typically the one that I do, kind of just trying to schedule kind of a new study plan to fix those areas.
Sure. Okay, so what would your default be if we didn't have this call tonight and you've got about 2 months until October? What would you be doing?
I'd probably be going to Khan Academy and picking one kind of each question section that they have and trying to work through them and see which ones I'm actually screwing up on the most and trying to do that, and then just taking a bunch more practice tests just to kind of get the nerves out if that's what it was.
Okay, and so what don't you like about that approach?
It seems too similar to what I was already doing.
So what do you think is missing then?
I think that's why I'm kind of here. I'm a little bit lost with it. I was kind of freaked out by how that test went just because I can't see what I did. I don't know if it was just a bad day. So that kind of causes a lot more anxiety about it than normally being okay, you screwed up on this section and this was the section that you messed up on the most, because then it's easier to go and say, okay, I need to fix that. But in this situation, it's more, okay, I don't know what I did. I don't know, what I kind of need to work on more. Because to be honest, if I look at kind of what I typically miss versus what I typically get right in logical reasoning, it kind of is, I've found more depends on the question itself rather than the type. I'll just miss some rather than others. So
Yeah, it's not always about question types. Sometimes you get things wrong just because they're difficult.
Right.
Beyond a certain point, once you've got the fundamentals down, you may not always have a particular weak area, or you may get more flaw questions wrong because there are a lot of them to get wrong, not because you have a particular weak area in flaw questions. Now, it's obviously also frustrating when tests are undisclosed because you can't see your results. You can't know what you got right or what you got wrong. And obviously after a few weeks, everything's kind of hazy anyway. So in the absence of that, how might you determine your weak areas without that disclosed exam?
I think again back to just going to Khan Academy and going through their sections that are specific types and seeing, kind of comparing them and seeing if I'm messing up more than others. I don't really have an idea after that.
Yeah, I mean, you could use analytics from a place like Khan Academy. You could do another timed exam or two.
Right.
A timed exam that you do today is also a decent sample. I mean, it's one exam, just like the test that you took. The official one was also just one exam. So it's obviously limited in sample size. So you could do 5 if you wanted to, and then average and see where you stand, and then see where are there any trends, if any. But as you said, also, question type analysis is only one piece of the puzzle. It could be the method of reasoning in a stimulus.
Right.
So in the absence of trends with regard to question type, what if you just took a handful of exams and reviewed them in depth? What if you did 1 or 2 a week between now and October?
I think that would probably help, because doing more in general typically gives you at least something to look at and kind of more confidence in knowing something about it. I think my issue is the fact that I just don't know what I was messing up on. So probably good.
Is there anything missing from that approach for you?
I mean, there's always the option of it being, they are random. So if it doesn't have the kind of question I was messing up on, there might be some discrepancy to what I would end up focusing on.
Perhaps. Yeah. I mean, if you do 2 a week, though, you'll be covering a decent number. Maybe evaluate the argument questions only come up once in a blue moon, so you won't encounter too many of those, but they're also quite rare anyway. And the good news is that for a question type like that, again, it's not all about question type, first of all. So methods of reasoning span a wide variety of question types. And that one in particular straddles the line between strengthen and weaken. So if you do strengthen and weaken, you'll get better at evaluate at the same time.
Okay.
I want to invite others to chime in on this. Study plans for October. Imagine a lot of you are taking October. So curious to hear other thoughts from what others are doing.
I'm not taking mine in October. I think my plan is going to be to take mine maybe February. It gives me enough time to study again. I took mine in July, and I was thinking, hey, I'm doing good. I was doing good on the logic games, studying wise, and self-preparing, doing good on the logical reasoning. But my biggest challenge was reading comp. Like, I know that comes so easy for everybody else, but that's the toughest part for me. And I'm just, I know that my last score was really low. It was 139. But I know that once I get the reading comp where it should be, I know I'll get 170 or even higher. And I'm not just saying that. I'm actually, because like I said, the logic games for me were pretty simple. And then the logical reasoning was really simple. I think I just had a few problems with understanding, what is the apparent discrepancy in certain ones and pick that one, which one explains it. But as far as reading comp, even when I'm slowing it down and trying to, just figure it out and see what the test taker is saying or what, how to beat the test taker or the test maker, I just completely bomb it.
I hear you, Billy. I want to keep the focus on Kendall here for now. We might get to you later. But do you have any advice for Kendall about a study plan for October? What's worked well for you?
I would say slowing it down to where, you're kind of breaking it piece by piece. Like, let's say you're taking apart an engine and you just, piece by piece of what's bothering. Like with me, with the logic games, what makes it so easy is just by, not just working through it, but seeing why did I get this wrong and why did I get it right. And then also, just trying, even if you fail, just take a whim. And then next thing you know, when you see why you were thinking like this, like, why did I think that this was the correct answer? And then next thing you know, you can look in the in the back to see, what they say, but you can go by what your real thoughts are. And it helps a lot for me.
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, two things I want to pull out from there for you, Kendall. One is the idea of reviewing in depth, really looking to analyze where your misunderstanding comes from and look up the Socratic review method again for more on that. The second thing is breaking it down piece by piece. So I said, I would suggest for you, if you have the time, 2 timed exams per week, along with detailed review of those exams. What might be missing from this is if there are certain weak areas you notice, like let's say you're not coming across evaluate the argument questions and that's stressing you out. Well, there aren't that many of them, so it's not that big a deal. But if they're stressing you out, then spend time on them. Take an hour or two and go through a handful of them. There really have only been a handful of them ever, so wouldn't be that much work to go through a bunch, and then you would have that one crossed off your list. How does that feel to you?
Good plan. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions or challenges for you tonight?
I don't know if this is kind of in the same realm of LSAT or not. You can just stop me if it's not. Do you guys talk about like how to start choosing law schools? Because I have an Excel spreadsheet of like ranking and their requirements for LSAT and GPA, but when people talk about writing for a personal statement and how you're supposed to include those schools, specifically why you're looking at those schools, I kind of get confused if you're not really sure of an area of law that you want to go into yet.
You don't have to know a particular area of law.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll keep the focus on LSAT or more tactical admissions questions for now, but quick answer is look up law school transparency. They have all the data.
Okay.
And school websites too. Or thanks for playing, Kendall. All right. I want to invite Elton. Elton had hand raised.
How's it going, Steve?
Hey, Elton, what's up? How are you?
I'm good. So my biggest challenge right now, I would say, section-wise would probably be reading comprehension. I'm more I come from a communication studies background, so I'm more like analytical. So I like to like really take my time and depth with context or with the text. So therefore, like, you know, the rush feeling kind of like has been a challenge for me. And then LR sometimes is also a challenge too, because usually I just have a timing problem. Like I'm always like struggling to get to the last 5 questions. And so I'm often left to guessing for the last 5. So usually ballpark hitting around like 6 or 7, but sometimes I'll like do way better depending how well my guessing is, or I'll do way worse if my guessing is horrible. So really my question is right now, should I be taking my time and like slowing down, like really trying to like work on my foundations, or, you know, since I am taking like the August test, should I kind of just brute force it and like maybe with like enough tests taken, I'll be able to like get my score up where I want it to be?
Which approach seems more likely to you to work?
I definitely need more practice taking tests. I've only taken like 2 practice tests so far, and I was planning to take on 2 next week and 2 the following week. But I feel like when I slow down, I really do comprehend the questions a lot more. And so when I'm doing it on time, like I definitely understand where the author is coming from more. But unfortunately, it's like a luxury I don't really have right now. So that's why I'm also considering taking another test after August.
How much time do you have now between now and the August exam, which is about 3 weeks?
I mean, I graduated, so there's no like pressure for school or anything. I am in like the job hunt right now. I'm also actually talking to a company, so that's also like been kind of a challenge too, like juggling with that. But generally speaking, I have 4 or more hours a day dedicated to studying.
Okay, so what if you did both approaches, both as I understand them being full-length exams and review of those exams, and figuring out alongside that, as you're doing it really, how could you manage your time differently so that you're not left with the least amount of time for the most difficult questions? Because if you're telling me you get to those last 5 and the clock is ticking, you've got, I imagine, a couple minutes remaining, correct me if I'm wrong. And so you have the least time for the toughest questions in this section. No surprise to me that wouldn't go that well. No surprise that would be a lot of guessing, which then adds a wild degree of randomness or variation. In reality, you need to have extra time for those questions. Yeah. So for you, I'd really be looking at pacing, section management. Do you go through the easier questions more quickly somehow? Do you not second guess yourself as much? Or maybe the last 5 aren't actually the most difficult for you in particular. Maybe number 19 is a super difficult parallel flaw question or principal application question. So maybe you should have flagged number 19 so that you would have more time for number 24, which is a tough strengthening question, but you're good at strengthening questions, so that's fine.
Absolutely. Also, you talk about after taking a test, always going through detailed review. Do you recommend doing that on the day of the test, like give yourself like a couple hour break and then going back later that day? Or would you recommend, you know, giving yourself the rest of the day off and then going back the next day and then potentially doing the detailed review then?
How do you feel after doing a full exam being 3 sections for the flex, about 2 hours?
For the flex, I feel a lot less tired. When I do 4 or 5, I'm definitely more exhausted. And I'm at that point, I definitely probably wouldn't be able to do one. But after 3, if I give myself like a little bit of a break, maybe go for a bike ride or like just a walk outside, feel a little more freshened, take a quick power nap. I'm not saying like I'm at 100%, but I'm definitely capable of probably doing it.
Okay. And when are you doing 4 or 5 sections, if at all?
That was before I knew the tests were going to be flex. I did 1. So my first practice test I did a 4 section. And the second one I just did a couple days ago was a 3 section.
All right. Well, good news is August is flex. Flex is 3 sections. 4 and 5 section exams are no longer relevant to you for August. And let's be honest, October and November probably not relevant for that
Probably,
either,
yeah.
because those are going to be flex 2. So
Okay.
3 sections, you feel good. After that, you feel okay. It's not totally exhausting you. If you feel up to reviewing, then review then. As long as your memory is fresh of what you were thinking in the moment, that's fine.
Okay. And sorry, I don't mean to take much more time, but
No, be
last
selfish.
question.
This is for you.
Thank you. For reading comprehension, I definitely really struggle with the science passages often. I don't know, I'm like really stubborn. Like I really don't like skipping around. I like kind of like to how to do it like straight through. I don't know. What would you say? Like maybe what should I skip it through and then come back to it, or should I like attempt to see? Because like often the science passages actually are like the first or second one, and it's like one of the easier passages. It's just for me, I always struggle with the content of it.
Great question. I want to let others chime in on this one. So others who have struggles with reading comprehension, particular topics, maybe science or others, feel free to unmute yourself and share what works or what doesn't.
So kind of with both sections, like LR and RC, I found that like strategic skipping has really helped me. So like in LR, like if there's like parallel, like I'm really bad at parallel flaw, like, and they're like paragraphs per answer, and I just don't have time. So I skip those intentionally so that I can make sure that I get to those easier ones that I know I'll get. And then when I go back in a review, I make sure that I write those down so that I know I need to go back and really review those. And I usually try really hard to find the trap answer because I am a master at picking that one. So I try really hard to kind of find that one first. So I know like, oh, that's it. I'm not going to pick that one. But with RC, so I'm usually good with science. It's the stupid law ones that I struggle with, which is super ironic because that's what we're trying to do. But those are the ones I struggle with. So as much as I hate like skipping around because I'm scared I'm going to accidentally skip one and then, forget to go back and answer it, I usually will like glance at all of the articles and say, oh, this is the law one. I'm just going to skip that one first. And because sometimes my timing is like, I can't get my timing down. So usually there's one that gets cut short anyways. And I'd rather it be the one that I'm terrible at than one I for sure can get, if that makes sense. Because I don't want to lose points on something I could have answered. I just didn't have enough time for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Brittany. Others have thoughts to share around reading comp approach?
Hi. So I actually struggle with the science a lot as well because that was not at all what I majored in. And I found that if I actually focus less on the detail of those, I get them better, because usually like they ask you maybe 1 or 2 questions about like a term or the concept in there, and most of them you can get if you just focus instead on like the overall structure of it. Like, okay, we have a traditional view and then there was like new evidence and then now like it's different, or like now we don't know which like theory to look at, or now maybe we're agreeing with the new theory. And if I've gone through that and instead of those, because sometimes I'll like highlight a little bit, for those I'll just highlight nothing except maybe like the key term they're talking about, and try to just go through it a lot faster, just to read through once and just look at the overall structure. I do a lot better because you spend more time trying to figure it out, and like if you're not good with it, you're not going to figure it out, and it's just going to confuse you more. So like kind of doing the opposite, I guess, of what makes sense is focusing less on the detail. And I've been able to get more questions right and go through them a lot faster that way.
Okay, so focusing more on structure instead of the fine details. Okay, because I definitely get tripped up on the details. Like sometimes I'll read something, I'm like, what they just say, and I like kind of ponder on it. But yeah, that's very helpful for me.
Yeah, for sure.
You were subtweeting me, Steve, when you mentioned the science articles. Because here's the thing. LSAT, they don't give a flying crap about migratory birds or coral reefs or musical practices in medieval France. But the thing is, because of the fact that they don't give a crap about it, they're never really going to be super detail oriented. on a lot of these questions, it'll be a structure. And so, I mean, in the same way that they'd be like, okay, research shows that electoral behavior in single member districts is so and so, is the same way they'll propose to you that, okay, lemurs in certain forests will do X and lemurs in other forests will do Y. So as long as you get to the point where it's like, okay, I know the structure inside and out, I know what to look for when I'm reading the question, then you'll be set. But also, don't take it for granted. Because, I mean, Steve and I, we had a whole, week where we were just like, screw science passages. But the thing is, a lot of the time, if you have leisure time where you're like, okay, let me read, if you see a science article pop up on your feed or something like that, even if it's just like a BuzzFeed article on some weird, obscure scientific stuff, read it. Because the worst thing that can happen is there's exposure that happens to something that you wouldn't have found out about before, that you, when you see it on the LSAT, you're like, okay, I know somewhat what they're talking about, to where you don't get bogged down in the weird details.
Fantastic advice, Daniel. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, as you said, science passages, it's not really about the details, and they're not actually going that in depth compared to what the BuzzFeed article might do. So the BuzzFeed article could actually be harder in certain ways if you were reading for details. But if you're reading for structure, the BuzzFeed article will likely be easier because they're not trying to confuse you the way the LSAT's trying to confuse you. The LSAT passages are written in order to be confusing. That's why even if you're interested in law, because after all, you're looking to go to law school, like Brittany said, they're writing it in an academic way where the author is trying to impress you with how convoluted they can be in expressing a certain idea. So unraveling that, unmasking that, looking at the underlying formula of the passage, how it's worded, how it's structured, that's really what matters. So yes, read for structure, Elton. Yeah, absolutely.
I had one more thing that I thought of also. So what kind of, this is going to sound kind of silly, but I found that when I'm doing reading comprehension, I tell myself that it's really exciting. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is like a huge thing that I'm learning. And like, I try to tell myself, like, this is not the stupidest thing I've ever read in my life. Like, this is going to make me so much smarter. And like, it's like a mental battle with myself, like going into it, like being super positive. But I know that sounds silly, but it kind of changed how I started looking at them when I hated reading about stupid moral whatever in law passages.
That's excellent advice, Brittany. I have a student in my courses who often says the same idea. She always says, "Oh, for real?" Like, that's what she always says whenever she comes across anything that she is bored to death by. Feigning interest, feigning excitement. This is the most interesting thing in the world. What if you took that "oh, for real" approach to whatever you read that you liked the least, as if it were the most interesting thing ever? I like to caricature or exaggerate what's going on, because things are boring when they're bland and moderate in the middle. What if you exaggerate, the idea of, in logic and argumentation, this idea of reductio ad absurdum, taking something to the most irrational extreme just to show how ridiculous it could be. If you do that, it can be a lot more fun. How does all of this sound to you, Elton? How does it strike you?
That was pretty good, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go for it. No, go for it.
I don't know if this helps you, but what has helped me improve is kind of doing the same thing that I did in LR. I kind of, before starting the passage, I kind of skimmed the questions first to see what I need to like focus my time on more, like if they're talking about a specific person or if they're talking about, like, I focus more on structure, but it kind of helped me guide what to look for and focus, like, in certain parts of the passage, what I need to focus on or what I need to highlight, because I kind of skimmed the questions first. So that helped me. So I don't know if it's going to help you, but yeah.
I have something I'd add to that. In addition to looking at structure, like Miriam and other folks have said, I think one thing that's helped me, because, even though I love to read, but there's some passages where I'm just like, what? And I love reading, but I try to find the main point, quickly find the main point of every paragraph. And so I will, in my notes, I know Steve says that, you don't want to get too bogged down in like the underlining and stuff, but I will try to at least find the main point of different parts of the text so that I can at least have a sense of the overall flow of how each paragraph relates to the one before it. Why are they saying X, Y, and Z? Are they starting with an introduction of a general overview? Are they mentioning critics in the beginning? Are they mentioning critics in the middle? Like, what does the author believe? I think that helps basically distill each paragraph into one sentence, because I would argue that each one basically could be. And then when it comes to answering questions, as other folks have mentioned, there are some that are really just gimmies, like, how is this word used? You want to read around the word, the sentence that it's in, maybe a couple sentences before and after to get a sense of the context. Main point, you should be able to do well. I think if you've read through and you can identify what's supporting evidence and then what's like bigger picture stuff. But as has already been stated, you don't want to get too bogged down in the details. I would even argue that sometimes passages that are more interesting can actually be a challenge too, because I'm reading, like I think Daniel mentioned lemurs. I love animals, so if I'm reading about lemurs and evolution or something, like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, how did they evolve different behavioral? And then I'm like, wait, that's not what this is about. Like, I'm not supposed to be, this is an Animal Planet. I'm doing a test. So I think either way, like, sure, boring stuff can be challenging, but even stuff you like can be challenging because you might get sucked in, so I think focus on the main point, focus on structure, and just be mindful of time, I think could be helpful.
Can I add on to Richard?
Sure, please.
So I do the exact same thing Richard does, and then I kind of make it a game of when you read that paragraph and you know that they said that paragraph for whatever reason, whatever that main point was, if you can think of how someone's going to ask you a question about that main point and how they're going to trick you with the information around the main point, it helps you kind of remember that paragraph as well as kind of where it is. Because if you can kind of be like, okay, I'm reading this passage, that's where they're going to ask me about this, and this is where they're going to ask me about this. If you start to do that, because when I started to do that, I started noticing, like, you'll get better at realizing what they're probably going to ask you, and then you can kind of prepare for it. And then you also have kind of a linear pathway of knowing, and it keeps you engaged. So kind of branching into a game format with the main point eventually will kind of help streamline you when you get to the questions, I found, at least.
That's cool. Thank you for sharing that, Kendall. And Elton, I just want to call out here that we've gotten more engagement on this question than any other. Folks have shared a wide variety of different ideas and strategies and tactics, both on video here as well as in the chat. Actually, the chat's been blowing up too with a lot of ideas as well. So rather than calling out any one specific idea, I just want to invite you to consider that there's a lot of room to play here, things you may not have tried out yet, lots of room to experiment. And actually, I taught a reading comprehension masterclass on review inside the course a couple of weeks ago. And the big takeaway, if I could give you one big takeaway from that, was the idea that there are lots of different ways you could approach passages. And so whatever you're considering, try a handful one way, a handful another way. See what works better, see what gets you higher accuracy, and see what feels more comfortable. Obviously, with August in particular, there may not be a ton of time to experiment, but you mentioned, I believe, you were open to potentially retaking in the future as well. And so if that is the case, then you may have lots more time to experiment with it as well. How are you feeling about everything?
I feel pretty good. I'm probably actually gonna do one more set after this. Maybe try some of those. Last thing I do, because I've heard different perspectives on this. When it comes to taking notes, I personally don't like the highlighters that they give me online. I like to use the scratch paper that they give me. The debate is whether I should write a note after each paragraph, or I should kind of train my retention rate, and so therefore wait until I complete the whole passage and then then use the bullet points for each paragraph. So I kind of I've tried both. I'm more leaning towards writing after each paragraph, just so that way I don't forget, and I'm not sitting there thinking, oh man, what did I just say, and wait 10 seconds, because every second is really precious to me.
Nice. Well, if it feels good and it works, that's great. If it's feeling like there's room to improve, then try something else. I'm not going to say
Okay.
yes or no on it. It's all about what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think you've got a lot to think about here, so I'll leave you here.
Yeah.
But thank you, Elton.
Thank you, Steve.
Of course. Now, Richard, I know that you expressed interest in getting some coaching, and I really appreciate your contributions as well tonight. So I want to invite you to play.
Oh, great. Well, a little surprised that you said that, but I was waiting for it tomorrow. But so I've got a couple main buckets. I actually am interested in this study plan. I know you mentioned to some people that they should do like 1 to 2 practice exams a week between now and October. I'm not taking the August exam. I'm taking it in October. So I'm kind of noticing a pattern in your advice, and I wanted to share a bit about my scoring as well as what my goals are, and then give you a sense of what my experience has been. But so right now I'm in the mid 160s. My highest non-retake practice exam was a 166. Obviously there's no guarantees there, but that's around where I am. And I'm getting good enough with logical reasoning that I can get to between -3 and -2. And then with reading comp around -4, logic games around -5. So these are just rough estimates, but in that range. But I'm also, and so I'm, I know I have the materials. I'm in a prep class right now that's been really useful, but I do feel myself hitting not a wall, but like, I kind of feel like a car engine that's been running for a while. Like literally my head feels warm, like almost like I've been like really using my brain power. And I'm trying to be mindful of rest. I'm trying to be mindful of burnout. And I don't feel like I'm completely burnt out, but I'm like, how am I going to sustain this to October? Similar to what Elton said, there is the job situation. I am looking to get a job soon, and maybe I'll have one by October, hopefully. So I just want to know, like, the 1 to 2 exam a week with review, like I can do it, but I'm like, I hope that my score doesn't start going down as some people experience. So that's kind of where I am.
My biggest concern that jumped out to me, and you mentioned this in passing, but I thought it was important enough to call out, is burnout. Mm. You mentioned the car engine feeling kind of warm, like you've been doing a lot already. Yeah. And your scores are pretty good. Obviously, we're looking for 180. There's always room to improve.
Right.
And you've noted some weak areas potentially. Mm. So my question would be, where in your foundation do you feel you might be lacking, if anywhere?
And by foundation, what do you mean?
Basic approach, the fundamentals.
Yeah, fundamentals. Honestly, so I think that I'm pretty good. Well, I think my weakest question, right, type for logical reasoning is the parallel structure. Especially when you see like each answer choice is its own paragraph. Oof, that's really killing me. And then also I've noticed I have a tendency to almost, even though I know I should refer to the stimulus or the question stem, I'll go with my gut when I'm down to 2. I've done this with logical reasoning. I've done this with reading comprehension. And it's like, when I'm reviewing, I'm like, why didn't you just look at the question stem? Why did you go based on your gut? And it's like, I guess I just trusted my intuition, but I was wrong. And it's like, I think those few times when I do that, sometimes that keeps me from getting easy points. So I think it's, those are 2 of the issues. But otherwise, I've definitely improved for sure. So.
Cool. I mean, you've noticed a few issues. So that's important to flag that, recognize that you want to work on parallels on the side, drill them. That's fine. I don't think it's going to be the make or break for you though. I mean, there's like a couple per exam maybe, but if you were at 175 and that was the hardest thing left that you hadn't yet touched, yeah, work on that. But you noted reading comp, games, -4, -5. Those are big enough that there's room to bring them down without so much trouble given what you've invested up to this point. Now, I want to clarify one thing from earlier. I talked about doing 1 or 2 exams a week. That is a default after you've got the fundamentals, after you've got that foundation built. Because as I was saying earlier to Kendall, it's not always about question type. could just be you're getting questions wrong because they're hard. So it's about reviewing those in depth, looking at the method of reasoning. And if you notice that you're going with your gut and forgetting the question stem type, obviously that's a problem because you got to answer the question being asked, not just what you think might be asked. So it's about, comes back to habits, and that comes back to noting the traps.
Yeah.
So what could you change about your review process?
Review process. So I really want to go back to earlier exams that I've done. I've only retaken, I want to say 1 or 2 practice exams that I've done, but I do want to go back and see how well I do on ones I've taken in the past, not just go to new material, but see like, okay, can I identify what I got wrong last time with obviously enough of a break in between. And I'm a little nervous I won't have time to, on top of the homework I have from my current prep class, because it is a considerable amount of homework, plus the actual class. So, and obviously, as I mentioned, I don't want to burn out. But I do think that I could be doing a better job of reviewing old material.
Do you think that review of older material would be more useful to you than homework assignments from a class?
That's a good question. I don't know.
It's worth thinking about.
Yeah. Okay.
It's worth thinking about. Now, you've been very generous in sharing advice for others and insights for others. So I want to invite others to share any reflections for you. So folks, feel free to unmute yourself and share advice for Richard, if anything comes to mind.
Hi, Richard. It's Jordan. I just wanted to say that I had no structure. I'm using Steve's his study plan because I'm just bouncing around, not knowing what to start on, what to go to. I'm just finding, and I was supposed to write in June and July, but I didn't want to take the flex. I want to actually do it in class. So I've been using his study plan. Otherwise, I'm on Khan Academy, or I'm on the LSAT books, or I don't have any, like, I don't know what to go to study first or to study second. I get boggled down with time as well. So I'm just basically learning the information first, and then I'll work on timing myself. I don't know if that'll help you, but it's helped me. That's all I have to say, Steve.
All right. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you for sharing, Jordan. I appreciate that.
All right.
Other reflections or thoughts for Richard?
I have found when I do review, I try to review like pretty quickly after I take a test. Like usually I do them within the same day. I usually don't do my review the next day because I want to remember my thought process. Sometimes I don't remember like, oh, why did I pick C? Like I can't remember. And so I need to know like what my thought process was so that I don't do it again, if that makes sense. Like I need to make sure that I'm correcting it, but if I can't remember it, I can't correct it. And I'm just going to pick the same wrong answer again. So
yeah,
I would take them quick. I would do your review soon after you take it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Yeah. So big takeaway I would leave you with is just the importance of review and the idea of being deliberate about what you choose to work on. And as you said, Richard, I know we have a call scheduled for tomorrow where we'll go deeper, but I want to leave off here for now.
Sure. No, thank you all. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Richard. All right. So I know there were a few other hands raised. I don't know if we'll get to everyone, but I'm willing to keep going if you all are. So Christian, what's going on for you?
Hi, Steve. My biggest challenge has been that I started studying maybe 2 months ago, and I did a prep course, and I had a score increase of around 19 points into the 173. I got a 1 score there, but after having that score, the next practice tests have really been going down, especially in reading comprehension. Having from the -5 in the 173 all the way to -11, which has bring it down to the 163s to 165. And and that has really scared me. And also sometimes I have been maybe committing 2 or 3 mistakes in the logic games after having multiple sections with 0 mistakes. So I'm a little scared that I'm going backwards, and I haven't studied that much to be having a burn down already. So I know that is not the problem. Maybe it's a problem in fundamentals, or I don't know what it is. So if you could give me any advice on how to prepare. I'm taking the test in August at the end of this month, and after having that score that I didn't even expect, and then seeing how I'm going backward, it's a little scary. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Where are the wrong answers coming from? Which sections, which question types? Are there any trends?
Yes, so I can give you the comparison. When I got the 173, it was -1 in logical reasoning, -0 in logic games, and -5 in reading comprehension. And now I am doing around -2 or -3 in logical reasoning, -3 to -1 in logic games, and -11 to -9 in reading comprehension.
Sounds like a pretty clear trend to me.
Yes.
Reading comp. So how are you currently approaching reading comp?
Well, so I started to take a lot of notes, and I saw the trend going down. So what I've been trying to do lately is take less notes, highlight when I see a change of view or the turning, however, and that has been improving a bit, but I'm still concerned if I'm doing the right approach. Of what I'm doing is I'm taking the prep test and I'm reading over them and doing the exercises, sometimes on time and sometimes with time. And timing doesn't seem to be the problem. I don't know if it's the language barrier that sometimes it hits me a little, especially in reading comprehension, or if it's just that I'm overthinking, knowing that now I'm having 11 questions wrong and before I had 5 or 6.
I hear you. Yeah. So there's the mental game of knowing what happened before and having that potentially impact you. So there's a focus that one needs to develop to the task at hand. So how you get there, a variety of ways, topic for another day. I want to ask you though, in the meantime, we talked quite a bit about reading comp earlier with Elton. So I want to ask you, what was your biggest takeaway from that conversation?
Well, first, as someone said, I don't remember, sorry for that, but sometimes enjoying too much of the passage was bad for me because I really like law, and when I was enjoying those type of passages, I find that I was having a lot of mistakes because I wasn't focusing on the structure anymore. And I see that's really important, just reading for structure. And that was my main takeaway, the structure part, because sometimes I just try to read it and get the main points, but it's just a weird thing. I change in how to approach the reading comprehension, and what I'm trying to do now is stick to just read it, highlight, and try to make a structure in my mind so I can go and tackle every question.
So it sounds like you already have a sense of what needs to change.
Yes. And
if you could change one thing after this call, what would it be about your approach going forward?
Right now, I don't know, because with Elton, they gave me so many advices that I'm trying to process which one I think is going to be better for me. But especially that, just trying to forget a little about the wording and the convoluted reasonings and vocabulary that they do, and focuses more on a structure. Go through the passage, make sure that I know what is the first paragraph talking about, second, third, and then if there's a specific question, then just refer back to that structure to maybe read for the answer. That's what I think I'm going to do after this review today.
Excellent. All right. So for you, for Elton, for anyone else listening who struggles with reading comp, we've thrown out a ton of ideas tonight about different potential approaches. Make a list, see which one seems most promising to you relative to your current approach, and just say, I'm going to try to do 4 passages with this method. Track your results, see how that goes. Then try 4 with a different approach, see how that goes. 4 with 0 notes, 4 with the highlighting, 4 with paragraph summaries, 4 with simply extracting the main idea. And see, again, what feels good, what gets you the most points. But be deliberate, that's the key. And that's what I think you're noting is missing from your current approach. You're kind of, it sounds like your current approach feels kind of haphazard to you. Is that right?
Yes, that has been, the more I think I take notes and I focus more on just doing a lot of things to make sure I get the passage and all the understanding, the less I think I'm focusing on actually understanding the passage.
Yeah. So to me, it sounds like you know what you need to do.
Yes, actually, after Elton got all those advices, it was great. Half of the question, half of my problems were already done. But yes, and with that trend of just going a little down or missing a little more questions in both logic games and logic reasoning, do you recommend to just continue doing practice tests and then reviewing, of course, to make sure that I can, that when it comes down to the day of the test, I am less likely to commit those mistakes?
After you've built a foundation in the different sections, that is the thing to do. But you take the exams and you review. The review is actually the biggest, most important aspect of taking those exams. Obviously, simulating test day is important, and getting used to pacing and endurance is important. But the review is often neglected. That's the R in laser: learning, accuracy, sections, exams, review, the framework underlying my study plans. So review is the key. Socratic review method, implement that. So it's not just taking exams and checking your answers or checking the answer key. It's actually engaging in a detailed system of inquiry to figure out what tripped you up and what was holding you back, what was tempting about the wrong answer, and what was discouraging or unappealing about the right answer. And that applies to all sections, most notably really in reasoning and reading comp. Games is a little bit different, of course, but that's a conversation for another day.
Okay, thank you. That was it, but thank you for your help.
Oh, thank you, Christian. I want to invite Danielle.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Danielle. What's going on for you?
I would say my biggest challenge is confirming when that foundation is built. I'm still kind of hesitant on whether my foundation is solid enough and when to kind of start those practice exams for the October test.
Sure. So when I think about foundation, I think about having a basic familiarity with all the different sections, games, reasoning, reading comp, the wide variety of question types. You don't necessarily have to know the most rare types in depth, but a general familiarity with the majority of question types, where you felt like you could summarize the LSAT in general and explain to somebody else what's involved and what they're asking you about.
Okay, because I could kind of say I have that. I guess it's just me holding myself back and taking that practice test and getting more of that experience before the exam. Because when I do take, I would say in the past, when I was taking practice tests in the beginning of my prep, it really wasn't helpful for me because I could kind of see myself increasing but then decreasing. So I figured, just taking the time to understand and going through each type and knowing, the difference between, for instance, necessary versus sufficient assumptions and just being familiarized with it. So would you say now is a good time to start taking those practice tests leading up to the October exam, or would you recommend me waiting to the November? When is kind of the gauge for that?
That's a great question. October versus November, I don't think I can give you an answer on that one. I'm getting that one a lot lately, but they're both decently far off. So a lot could happen between now and then.
Okay.
But as for the foundation and when you're done with foundation versus taking timed exams, you said you feel, if I understood correctly, you felt overall pretty good about foundation, but there's still some hesitancy in doing those exams. Is that right? Did I sense that?
Right. Right. I would say that, yes. It's kind of, I guess for me, the first person who spoke, sorry, I don't recall her name. It's more confidence and building that because, like I said in the beginning, when I was taking those practice tests, it was kind of not doing so well. So that kind of made me kind of fearful and hesitant to kind of keep going with that. But now I feel like now that I have the skills, I still have kind of that hesitation to still go along in my process.
I hear that. I hear that. Who else hears that? If someone else feels some hesitancy around taking timed exams, just type in the chat or raise your hand. I have a feeling you're not the only one, Danielle. No, it's real. It's real. Now you've got 2 to 3 months between October and November, between now and those 2 dates. And so you have time to do quite a number of exams. And so what if the first exam was not your only one? What if you recognize that you could do 8 exams between now and those dates? You could do 10 or 12. What would change between exam number 1 and exam number 12?
I would say for me, really endurance. I know it's doing like 5 section. I know with flex it's 3. And I know some people were telling me, well, keep the 5 to kind of build your endurance, or keep an extra section to kind of build your endurance. So I would say that. And when I see like the clock going down for certain things, or if I'm like looking at, my time, it's kind of like that panicky feeling, and like my thought process gets really, distorted. So I would say more of like keeping endurance and really implementing those skills to the best of my potential.
There you go. There you go. So I think you have your answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course, Danielle. I want to invite Audrey. Audrey, you want to share what's going on for you?
Hi.
Hey, Audrey, what's going on? What's happening?
Thank you. And I am enjoying everything that is saying from everybody. I just feel a little nervous because I'm planning of doing my LSAT for the first time next year. And, I saw some practice question, and for example, like today, I went on Khan Academy and was doing one of them. And I noticed I've taken a long time to even comprehend what the English comprehension was saying, although I got it right in the end. And out of 4, I got 2. And I noticed the time went by so fast. So I got this anxiety feeling came over me, and I get nervous and my heart was beating, because I was saying to myself, what if I was in the real exam? I'm going to spend like almost 20 something minutes on one question. So how would I finish? So, I am getting those feelings, and I want to build the fundamental. As I heard people were saying, I need to build on that too, because I am relatively new to this thing. So I am like in the learning process. So I am enjoying myself listening to everybody who have been a prof on it already. I just need word of advice and encouragement at this time in my life. Because to be honest, I'm very nervous. I noticed I start like the LSAT plus, and I was reading and came across some tests.
Looks like we lost you, Audrey. Looks like Audrey may have lost her connection here. Hopefully she'll be able to rejoin us. My biggest thing for Audrey would be, and I'll relay this to her later, is she said that she's just starting off. So timing doesn't need to happen yet. Building that foundation first. Timing comes later. Learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. So learning is the textbooks. Accuracy is questions by type. S is timed sections. That's where timing comes in. And as I was saying to Danielle, where you start is not where you'll end up. So you don't want to expect that your first timed section is going to be your best. It's only one of many. Then your first timed exam, again, is only one of many. So it's a long road. And Audrey said she was just at the beginning. So the timing will come, but at the beginning, simply focus on getting it down, learning the theory, learning the fundamentals, and then applying them when doing questions by type. Timing later, don't time yourself at the beginning. That's my biggest takeaway for Audrey, and I'll share that with her later. Billy, I want to invite you to join us. What's going on for you? I know you mentioned reading comp before. What was your biggest takeaway from our previous discussion on reading comp?
It's a lot of insightful information, and I enjoyed all the information. With reading comp, I know everybody said pay attention to the structure. I would say that's one thing I do have a problem with too, is paying attention to the structure. Sometimes when that shift occurs, you don't know, who's speaking or even, if it keeps going on into a further detail, and that's that kind of gets me. And then sometimes I'm always rushing to try and make sure I get the answer. But I know some, couple times when I do get the main idea, I end up getting more of the questions right, but I'm always missing it some kind of way. And then also I'm trying to be an active reader with it. I know it's different type of questions that you got to ask yourself when you're reading the LSAT passage. And, I'm just still, I'm not able to see it. And so when I'm reading it and I'm practicing it, even untimed, I'm still like, I can't see it. And so with the logic games, I remember I did a time section of myself, and the best I've done was only miss 3. And so after that, I didn't want to take another one and mess that up, and I should have. And then with the logical reasoning, when I'm not timing myself, and I'm sitting there and I'm kind of studying the answer, and I'm analyzing the answers, and as far as the question, I get it right, and I end up not missing any. But reading comp is never there. I end up just rambling on through, and next thing you know, I'm just reading words, but I'm not actually, determining the meaning of the entire passage, or even determining, how does this go into this, and that makes me miss the main idea just completely.
I hear you. Now, we shared a lot of different strategies earlier about reading comp, many different things you could play with. I want to think about the main idea for a moment, and I want to ask others who feel good about reading comp, getting that main idea, what advice they might have for you. So folks, feel free to unmute yourself and share some advice for Billy regarding reading comp.
Hi.
Yeah, sure.
So kind of an outside perspective, but I'm going for 2 different degrees, and one is in English and one is in the sciences. So one thing I've learned from that I've applied to this is when you're reading a kind of passage where the main point is information being presented, where it's science, or it's something that's kind of mathematical and very deliberate, and there's not a lot of extra information around it, kind of to attack it in that perspective when you're looking at it, because it's not going to have as many shifting perspectives, or if they are shifting perspectives, that's the main point. If you're reading something that is philosophical or kind of story, you're looking more at a linear path than information about one thing. So it kind of helps to go about it where you're attacking it from those perspectives when you get in there. Because I've found a lot of the time, if you go in just thinking, oh, this is reading comp, and you go in and you just kind of attack all the passages in the same way, it gets a little bit messy because they're going to be organized in different ways. So if you kind of categorize it in your brain when you see it, and you're like, okay, this is science, and you read that first sentence and you figure out whether they're, if it's an argumentative or comparative versus just informative, that kind of helps focus you when you're looking for those main points, because they're going to be separated that way. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's actually really good. That's helpful. When I read that first sentence, it's like I'm just rambling through, and I'm like, okay, so what's being talked about? What's being discussed? But when you say, am I comparing, or what is being compared to, or what information? Yeah, that's actually very helpful. That way I can keep my mind open, because a lot of times when I'm reading it and I just keep running through, it's like, I get to the end of the passage and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm not really prepared for this question. And, I know you're not supposed to memorize everything, but you do have to take away some of the key points. And when that happens, I'm just at a blank. And so it's like, it was, and that's when I start having to rush and go through it again. So yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Kendall. And Billy, it sounds like you're in a pretty good place. And
yeah, that sounds really good, and it's really helpful. I know I'm with the LSAT, I think I want to take it. I know I said February, but I'm thinking about December because I took it twice before. And like I said, my highest score was a 139, and so I do want to leave myself some time to redo my personal statement. I didn't get into any schools, when I applied, and I was just kind of like, okay, what's going on right now? And so I spoke with, a couple schools, and they were waiting for my July. And when my July came back so low, I said, I gotta, I was about to kind of give up. Then I said, okay, let me see what's more. I took it also in September, and I remember the grocery store game that they brought up. I was at a blank. I mean, I sat there and I was looking at it. I mean, I hadn't done any reading or over the logical games, but I remember that game stumped me because it seems to me it was a really tough game because it had two different components. But, like I said, reading comp, I know once I get reading comp, I know my score will go from 139 to 170 or 175. And I gotta, I'm more that type of person that's competitive to where, if I'm, let's say if I'm playing a sport, I'm going to try and get that best score just for personal best. But with this LSAT is when I stopped at that logical game, when I only got 3 wrong, I shouldn't have stopped. I should have tried to keep going. I just didn't want to, mess it up because I was like, okay, that's my best score. And then, okay, I'm going to stop there. But, I got to keep going on that too.
yeah, I sense your dedication. On this. And so I invite everyone to add that level of commitment to this, where August LSAT's just 3 weeks away. That may not be enough time to reach the fullest potential, but good news is there's more LSATs just around the corner. October LSAT's about a month later. November's approximately a month or so after that. Then there's January, there's February. The LSAT's nearly every single month. And so you can always retake. Law schools don't average multiple scores. They only take the highest. And so, Billy, you said you're giving it several months. I applaud you for that because that will maximize your opportunity to reach that potential.
And then I also, I guess I kind of feel silly about saying that I do want to get into either Harvard, Cornell, or maybe Yale. But I would rather go to Harvard or Cornell more than Yale because Cornell seems like, they're really helpful. And in Harvard, I went to one of their info sessions. When I was sitting there, I was kind of talking to the people, or to the different candidates, and they were talking about the scores, and I kind of backed away because I was like, well, I don't want to tell my score because it's not a Harvard score. But, when they rejected me, I said, okay, well, I need to go over and see what is it? Why haven't I gotten into the school? And so now that's my plan, to see if I can get in there. And so I want to.
No, you're giving it your all. You're giving it your all. I love it. I'll leave you here, Billy, for now, and encourage you. Yeah, try out that new reading comp approach. You got some good advice from Kendall there. Thanks for playing. All right, folks. So we've been going at it for a while here. I appreciate you all showing up so powerfully and giving it your all, being open to new ideas, new challenges, and also to all of you who shared advice and insights for others as well. A couple of big takeaways I want to leave you with here. First off is the importance of review. For next steps, look up the Socratic review method. Secondly, we talked a lot about reading comp tonight. Trying out and experimenting with different reading comp approaches. There's no one perfect way, but I will say that I find the less complicated approaches tend to work better. So don't feel the need to over-optimize or put together too many different structures around what your approach looks like. Sometimes keeping it simple can work better, but play with it. Again, folks, I'm here for you. If you ever need anything, feel free to reach out. You can always contact me via email directly or DM on Facebook, Instagram, and such. Have a great night, and I will run more sessions like this in the future. So stay tuned for more, and everyone be well. Good night, all. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.